I'm Asmang Idris, and I'm here to do my ITQ presentation on port security, which is in the Cisco 2 course, chapter 11. So what we're going to do is discuss what port security means on a Cisco switch. I'm going to review a graphic organizer that instructors can use with their students, and just show you some unique ways to teach this type of lesson. So first of all, I'm just going to start by, I have a rack here with some Cisco routers and switches, and we have several switches on this rack, but the one right here is a Cisco Catalyst switch with, it's a 24 port switch with 4 gigabit ports. And the reason we do switch security is because when you have switches like this in distribution closets, like around your building, whether that's an office building or a school, people can access them physically. Physical layer is the quickest way to get into any network, so people can access them with just an Ethernet cable plugged into a laptop. So there's ways, besides physical security, there's ways to actually secure these ports. So if someone tried to plug in with like a rogue laptop or a rogue device, or even like a rogue Wi-Fi access point, we can protect these ports, and that's what we're gonna discuss today. So I will just say for this presentation, and this is exactly what I just went over here for this presentation, you know, switches are accessible through wall jacks, they're accessible through exposed, like open closets and things like that. So it's important that you teach students to secure their switches. So going next. So another thing you want to talk about with your students is that switches, they learn the physical addresses of whatever devices that are plugged into them, which are the MAC addresses. They're like the built-in addresses. So we're going to discuss today, on Cisco switches, you want them to remember certain MAC addresses. It might be like per port, or it might be like everything that's plugged into the switch. We want to like remember them and learn them, and switches keep them in the running configuration, which is like an electronic table of all the information that they know. So I'll just go here to the next slide, and then we're going to talk about that in this presentation as well. So our objective today is that students will be able to apply port security using different commands and shortcuts in our Cisco iOS in order to successfully protect or enhance security on Cisco switches. So this presentation will have the commands that are needed in order to do the application part of this, which is a lab a packet tracer lab that's built into Network Academy. There's a graphic organizer that you can use with your students to help them remember the commands. Commands are always a tricky point for students, so it's important to go over that with them. And then just to make a kind of a fun environment, there's a Jeopardy game that I like to use with them. And students love to compete against each other to help reinforce some of these concepts. So the first thing I'm going to just bring up right here is the graphic organizer. So if you go to this graphic organizer here, this should pop up here, and I'll move it onto the screen. And the students in the classroom have this in front of them. The commands we're going to review on this graphic organizer, we're going to start with just an overview of how to just enable basic port security. And as you see on this graphic organizer, I have blanks where they can fill in here, and I'll go through the PowerPoint with them. So this would take a majority of like the beginning part of your lesson. I'm not going to go through this with you, but I'm just going to show you on the PowerPoint where you'd find all these commands and just briefly explain them. But they would need all these commands for the lab, for the packet tracer lab. So going back to the PowerPoint. The first thing is to enable first port security at all, and this might be difficult to see on the film, but they pick a port, or they pick a range of ports. So like right now I'm plugged into port 1, but if I had another one plugged into port 2, they would do the interface range command, which means you're going to pick more than one port, and they always start applying port security by doing switch port dash security. That's how they'll always have to do it. So that will go on their graphic organizer too. And all the commands would be like in blue or red on this PowerPoint. So one of the ways we can apply port security is that on a switch, it can remember by default only one physical address. So if like the same laptop is plugged into that switch port, it will only remember that one. But you can change that to a maximum up to 8. So that's like if you had maybe like a guest network or something where different devices are physically plugging in, you can make it so it remembers more than one. And you can change that just by doing the switch port security maximum, and then whatever number you want. But your choices are 1 through 8. Now, static MAC addresses, with a static MAC address, this is for if you know that a certain port is going to only remember like one particular device and you only want it to remember that device. I always tell the students that like, if you want to like mess with your family, for example, if your brother or your sister has like an Xbox and they're like physically wired, as a lot of gaming systems are, and you only want it to remember that physical address, you can enable that address, but then you could also lock someone out by putting your physical address instead of theirs. So that's how you would do that command, by doing the switch port security MAC address and then whatever the physical address is. They can find the physical address by just going into the command prompt on their device, on their Windows device, and doing an IP config. They can do that on Xbox as well. So then we're going to just talk about dynamic MAC addresses. So dynamic MAC addresses, this would be like a real world application where, you know, you bring a new switch online and, you know, you plug 20 devices into it, and you want this switch to like learn all those MAC addresses without you having to manually enter them. You do the switch port security MAC-address sticky, which means make it stick. You know, remember all those MAC addresses that are plugged in and it's saved in the running configuration. That's called dynamic MAC address learning. Aging, this is something that in the past for the Cisco certification exams, Cisco loves for students to remember the aging command, which basically means by default, this port will remember, this switch, excuse me, will remember certain MAC addresses, but only for about a 5-minute time period. And then it'll age them out, like flush them from the table in the switch. So this is something that you can enable, so you can put like there's certain switch options here. Like you can do the absolute command, which will be deleted, those secure addresses will be deleted after a time you specify. Or you can do an inactivity command where if they haven't heard from that device, there's been no like data passing, it'll like just remove it from the MAC address table. So that's called aging. And then the next slide just goes over how you enable that a little bit. So moving forward, this is called security violations. This is another way you can secure your switch. With security violations, there's 3 modes. There's protect, restrict, and shut down. And what this does is basically per port on your switch, you can make it so there's a certain behavior that happens depending on what you select. So for example, we'll go over the first mode, which is protect. So with protect mode, you just enable it by doing switch port-security, and then the keyword violation, and then protect. And what protect does is it will recognize that the device is not authorized to be on your network, or if it's like a rogue device, it will not let that data pass, but it also won't inform anyone either, because a lot of network administrators and engineers, what they do a lot of their day is basically just monitor their network. So when they're monitoring it, however they're monitoring it, if they have like a syslog server or some SNMP trap set up, it won't inform them that a rogue device is on their network. It just won't let that data pass. So because it won't inform them, what I tell the students, and when you teach this, make sure you teach them pro no notification. So if you use protect pro, there's no notification. And also with this mode, legitimate traffic obviously will pass. So with the next violation, this is restrict. This is a more powerful command. Again, we're doing switch port security, this time doing violation restrict. What it will do is it won't let unauthorized data pass. It will inform the network team via an SNMP message or SNMP trap. They will be alerted. The violation counter will increase, and I'll show you that in a second, Authorized data will pass, but any unauthorized packets won't pass. So this one will inform the network team. So this is hard to see on the video, but if we did a verification command like a show port security, I always tell the students, and you should tell them too, they should know all their show commands so they can verify what they did on a switch. But basically what this graphic says is it has the port number, it has the maximum MAC addresses it remembers, so this one has 2 MAC addresses it remembers, and then it has what's called a security violation counter, and this one says 0, but if they were to do the restriction option on that port, this one has the protect option, that number will actually increase. So then as a network team, they can look and see, oh my gosh, we have security violations on our network. And they'll verify that through the show port security command. So the last security violation mode is shut down. This is the default mode if you don't change it. And with this mode, when this a rogue device goes onto the network, the device will actually, when it senses the rogue device, it will actually shut down that port, just that particular port, not the entire switch. The LED light, which should be green if data is passing, the LED light will go off. It goes into what's called error disabled mode. And the only way to get out of error disabled mode is for a network administrator to go in and issue the shutdown and no shutdown commands on that port. So, so that switch port security violation shut down. And then this is just a graphic showing what an error disabled port looks like. I always tell the students to make sure they read these errors. It really does spell it out for them. It says error disabled, security violation error detected on port F018. And then it says line protocol interface changes down. So it brings like the port in a down state. So those 3 that I just went over with you were the security violations. So to verify everything you do on your devices, you can do a show port security per interface is the second option, second bullet point. That's something you can do, and that's on the graphic organizer as well. And then the last portion of the graphic organizer is just Cisco best practice, which means if like the ports aren't in use, then you just shut them down. Now this is not a security violation shutdown, this just means like shut them down so when someone goes to plug in, they actually can't get onto your network if they're in a shutdown state. Now I just hope, I know in our school we have some wiring closets where there's switches exposed and they're not always locked, so I'm just hoping that our network team through our county has shut down those ports so no one can access our network. So that was the how to do the graphic organizer. The next part of this is the students will actually go through and do the packet tracer for this particular lab, which is on the port security, which I will just bring up and show you for 1 sec. Give me 1 second to bring that up. All these commands will be applied on this particular lab, and they should have their graphic organizer in front of them while they're doing this. So bear with me 1 second as I bring that up. Okay, so that particular lab, I do not have it available right now, but that will, the students can just apply all the commands we just went over through that particular lab. And so in closing, I showed you all about port security today, and all the different modes that are available, with paying particular attention to the violations, because that's like the trickier commands. Were there any questions before we close from anyone? Anybody have questions on anything? Okay, all right, well, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this presentation on switchboard security and learned a few things about Cisco switches and how to protect them. Have a good day.